A bright sky stretches overhead as a young man with dark hair quietly prepares himself for a visit that could change everything. A young man with dark hair freezes in shock, whispering under his breath as anxiety sweeps over him. A young man with dark hair bows deeply as the gray-haired man greets him, saying it's an honor and remarking that he looks like a classic protagonist. A young man with dark hair gulps, realizing he's face-to-face with the person everyone's been talking about. A confident man with a top-knot hairstyle steps forward, announcing to everyone that his name is Musashi, the god of manga. The gray-haired man welcomed the young man with dark hair, mentioning his wife had worked hard to prepare for the visit and inviting him inside. Two blonde women in aprons share a laugh as Ryu-chan encourages everyone to eat before the meal gets cold. One generous and inviting voice urged everyone to dig in, remarking with amazement on how delicious all the food looked. Everyone gathers around the table as the gray-haired man thanks them for the meal. A smiling man leans in, saying that Rika has mentioned the nervous dark-haired boy a lot lately, which leaves him startled. The man with tied-back hair smiled gently and said he was happy to finally meet the boy who had grown so close to his daughter. The dark-haired young man fidgets and nervously tries to explain that he and Rika aren't what everyone seems to think. The dark-haired boy stammered that they were just normal friends and had only met because he helped the blonde girl when she was lost. The older man joked that he was just being protective since the dark-haired boy was Rika's first male friend, and the blonde girl quickly vouched for him. The dark-haired boy nervously thought that any father with a daughter would probably be sensitive about situations like this. The black-haired man considered what he might do if he had a daughter of his own. The blonde girl with green eyes quietly admitted she would see any guy who approached Rika as a threat. A blonde girl with green eyes blushed and said she had warned them not to say strange things when Ryu-chan was around. A blonde woman sat across from a black-haired man, quietly asking if he was really Ryu, as uncertainty hung between them. A blonde woman nervously asked the dark-haired boy why he was staring at her, quickly insisting it was nothing when he looked away. Rika yelled at her father to stop embarrassing her, while Papa quickly reassured Rika that everything was fine and urged her to calm down. A man in a red sweater and a blonde woman sat at the dinner table, remarking that Rika is growing up and starting to get embarrassed about boys. A middle-aged man with a gentle expression gazed into the distance, quietly admitting he always thought the girl would stay little forever. A joyful blonde girl ran forward clutching her white stuffed bunny and called out for her papa, her voice bright and eager. The blonde girl burst out that when she grows up, she wants to marry papa. A reflective or thoughtful person lifted their hand to partially cover their mouth, caught in a quiet moment after the blonde girl's bold declaration. A blonde woman smiled softly at a man with black hair as he covered his mouth, lost in his thoughts. A young man with tousled black hair addressed Yuseon-kun, saying he had heard Yuseon-kun was a fan of his. The gray-haired man invited the young man with dark hair to tour his studio after dinner, and the young man eagerly accepted, saying it would be an honor. Someone excitedly suggested heading to Kishimoto-sensei's studio right away, and another voice agreed they should go now. Somewhere out of sight, someone let out a long, weary sigh. Ryu-chan hugged his paper bag and told the blonde woman he could die happy after seeing Kishimoto-sensei's studio and getting an autograph. The blonde woman told the tall man she admired his work more than anyone, and he brushed off her praise as they walked down the hallway together. A hand swept wide as someone excitedly announced this was Rika's suite room. A young man with dark hair squeezed the blonde woman's hand and said it felt like a manga library, teasing that she must really love shonen manga. A playful blonde girl teased Ryu-chan that everyone was just as surprised as he was, and he quietly accepted her words while reaching for a book. A playful blonde girl peeked through the doorway and warned the black-haired boy not to touch anything, while he promised to listen. The young man with dark hair sat on the floor, quietly admitting to himself that being in a girl's room for the first time felt strange. A contemplative and anxious person gripped a glowing smartphone, telling themselves they needed to stop overthinking. A cheerful blonde girl appeared behind the door and called out a bright greeting, startling the young man with dark hair as he clutched his tablet. A warm and approachable blonde woman smiled and told the surprised young man with dark hair to call her Maria-san instead of ma'am. A young man with dark hair knelt in surprise as Maria-san, holding a book, announced she would reveal her daughter's dark past to him. Maria-san beamed as she lifted an orange photo album, announcing she had a collection of photos showing Rika growing up. Maria-san flipped open the orange album, telling the young man with dark hair that these photos showed Rika growing up and quietly asking if it was alright. A young man with dark hair suddenly realized he'd found the photo from when he took Rika to ManhwaCapped and wondered aloud about ManhwaCapped itself. A tall blonde witch winked and lifted her leg, holding up a heart-shaped wand, while a short blonde witch stood shyly beside her. The blonde woman told the young man with dark hair that she had dreamed of cosplaying with her daughter, saying even embarrassing pasts must be inherited. Then, the blonde woman cheered that she'd finally uncovered her daughter's dark past, leaving the young man with dark hair stunned and questioning her discovery. A blonde girl in gothic cosplay struck a dramatic pose, declaring that this was goth fashion cosplay and calling it a classic case of Chinibu. A loud, urgent shout bursts out, and Mama flinches in shock as she hears someone call her name. Still, the young man with dark hair blurted out his shock, while the blonde woman kneeling cheerfully admitted she had shown him. A young man with dark hair muttered to himself that he was completely doomed. The distressed blonde girl clutched the young man with dark hair's jacket and insisted she had stopped cosplaying, calling it a mistake from her youth. A cheerful blonde woman peeked out the door, announcing she was leaving, while the angry blonde girl yelled at her not to come back in. The young man with dark hair knelt on the floor beside the blonde woman, both tense and silent in the awkward moment. A blonde girl with tears asked the young man with dark hair if he would keep her secret, and he quietly agreed since he had no one to tell. A blonde-haired girl grimaced, letting out a pained sound as distress washed over her face. A young man with dark hair tried to reassure someone, gently telling them not to feel embarrassed. A young man with dark hair reassured the blonde girl, saying everyone goes through an embarrassing phase, but she never seemed to have one like his. A young man with dark hair admitted he also went through a bad phase in middle school, surprising his unseen listener. A young man with dark hair offered to show a photo on his phone, and the blonde girl eagerly told him she wanted to see it. The young man with dark hair found what he was looking for on his phone, as the blonde girl watched him with hopeful anticipation. An unknown hand offered a smartphone to the blonde-haired woman, and she reached out in shock, asking what was happening. The blonde character stared at the smartphone, her voice trembling as she wondered aloud if what she was seeing could really be true. Still, Ryu-chan stood confidently with dark energy swirling as someone questioned if it was really him and declared the power of darkness was awakening within. The blonde girl sitting on the floor teased the nervous dark-haired boy, asking how he got so bulky since he used to be small and cute. The dark-haired boy admitted he used to feel scrawny and weak, so he started working out and quickly grew taller before high school. The blonde woman holding her phone turned to the dark-haired boy and asked if he regretted not meeting her 2 years earlier, then wondered if he disliked her now. The blonde woman snapped at the black-haired man, demanding to know what he meant and insisting he had no idea how much she cared, while he just looked confused. The blonde woman with wide eyes gasped and covered her mouth, blurting out her shock. The black-haired young man looked to the side with a nervous smile, quietly asking if the person before him was really Rika. Blonde woman and a dark-haired young man lock eyes, both blushing and sweating in silence as the awkward tension lingers between them. A nervous blonde girl and a blushing dark-haired boy stand inches apart, caught in a tense silence as pink light sparkles behind them. A young man with dark hair nervously called out to the blonde girl, unsure if he recognized her. A nervous blonde woman tries to greet a blushing, sweating dark-haired man, but her words catch in her throat. The blonde woman clenched her fists, lowering her head as she firmly told the dark-haired man she only thought of him as a good friend. A young man with dark hair, cheeks flushed, stammered that he wanted to be a good friend. The blonde girl awkwardly insisted they really were good friends, and the young man with dark hair nervously agreed with a forced smile. A blonde woman stood beside a dark-haired man, both blushing and sweating as awkward silence hung between them. Someone called out to Rika, and she answered with a quiet, uncertain yeah. A dark-haired man smiled warmly as he told the blonde woman he was grateful she invited him over and let him meet Kishimoto-sensei. A blonde girl with green eyes smiled warmly, telling Ryu-chan she would never forget today and inviting him to visit whenever he liked. A young man with dark hair smiled and confidently affirmed what someone else had said. The dark-haired man assured the blonde woman he would visit again, his smile lingering as they enjoyed their moment together. Someone unseen expressed regret that the visitor hadn't stayed a little longer. The tall dark-haired man decided it was time to leave and told the blonde woman he should head home for dinner. A cheerful blonde girl grinned and told someone she was leaving for Hawaii on a family trip tomorrow. On the glowing city street, the dark-haired boy wished the cheerful blonde girl a safe trip and told her not to forget sunscreen. A dark-haired man thoughtfully told the blonde woman to call him if anything happened, joking that he would swim to Hawaii if needed. A calm dark-haired boy watched a muscular swimmer cut through the water, quietly thinking it might be possible for him with his own physique. A playful blonde woman teased a dark-haired man about spending money on a plane ticket, laughing that he was more sensible than she expected. A cheerful and friendly blonde girl waved goodbye, telling Ryu-chan she would see him at school, and he replied with an easygoing agreement. A young man with dark hair glanced back and told someone he'd see them at school, his smile warm against the fading light. A blonde-haired woman with green eyes gazed ahead in silence, her calm expression reflecting a quiet, thoughtful mood. A nervous girl gripped her shirt tightly, anxiety written across her face as she tried to steady her breathing. A young man with dark hair stared at the glowing sunset and muttered in frustration that he couldn't believe how serious things had gotten. A surprised blonde girl asked if Kim-kun really lived nearby, and Kim-kun replied that his place was just 2 stops from Seiho at Chito's Funabashi. A cheerful blonde girl laughed and told a tall dark-haired man that it was just gimbap, but she thanked him for enjoying it. Someone off-screen said they loved the meal and asked that Tojo's mother be told, while another voice praised Tojo for working so hard for someone else. A young woman with blonde hair gazed at the 2 students in the background, quietly hoping she could become someone kind like them. A protective young man with dark hair gently reassured the blushing blonde girl in a hat that things might be uncomfortable, but they were almost there. Urgency rising, a young man with dark hair shouted that they were about to lose their pursuers and urged someone to grab his hand. A young man with black hair smiled softly, a gentle calm settling across his face as warm light filled the scene. A confident dark-haired man stood in front while a nervous blonde woman watched him anxiously from behind. A blonde woman with a gentle smile touched her collarbone as warm light wrapped softly around her. Golden Week, Day 5, Akihabara bustled under a clear blue sky. A resolute and determined figure stepped forward, their footsteps echoing with purpose on the concrete. A young man with dark hair scrolled through his phone, quietly noting he had finished buying all the manga he needed. He wondered aloud if he should grab something to eat before heading out. The indecisive figure stepped forward and quietly considered just going to their regular ramen shop instead. A blue-haired girl yelled urgently, telling everyone to move out of her way. A young man with dark hair turned his head, sounding confused as he asked what was going on. Suddenly, a blue-haired girl in a green beret launched herself toward a dark-haired man, and he blurted out a confused question. Someone off-screen sounded baffled, asking why there were panties floating through the air. A young man with dark hair took a direct hit to the face from a massive pink fist. Confusion echoed as someone off-screen wondered what had just happened. A mysterious and assertive girl lifted a pair of panties toward a dark-haired man, leaving him shocked and utterly confused by the bizarre situation. A dark-haired man grimaced in pain, clutching his injured arm, while a blue-haired woman watched him with growing concern. A blue-haired girl adjusted her hat and told the young man with dark hair she expected more gratitude after saving him and getting a nosebleed. A young man with dark hair reached out to Mila, urgently asking what was happening as a group of suited men sprinted straight toward them. The blue-haired girl seized the young man with dark hair by the wrist, urgently telling him there was no time to explain and begging for his help. The young man with dark hair grabbed the blue-haired girl's wrist and urgently warned her that she was heading toward a dead end, leaving her confused. The dark-haired young man shouted for the blue-haired girl to follow him, and she quickly agreed as they ran together through the crowded street. A bright ramen shop sign glowed under the clear blue sky, its bold lettering greeting everyone with a cheerful welcome. A man with green hair pointed ahead and urgently told the others to move in that direction as 3 men in suits followed his lead. A tense blue-haired girl whispered to the serious black-haired boy that someone was coming. The blue-haired girl leaned forward, gasping for air, and let out a heavy breath near the tired man. The blue-haired girl thanked the dark-haired man for helping her, and he explained he only got caught up by accident but wanted to know why she was chased. Sasha sat down at the table, introduced herself, and asked the dark-haired man his name. He replied that he was Kim Yu-sung. The girl with blue hair asked if Kim Yu-sung was Japanese, and he explained he was a second-generation Zainichi Korean, leaving her surprised. Kim Yu-sung demanded that Sasha stop dodging the question and explain who those people were and why they were after her, but she hesitated. Kim Yu-sung turned away, telling Sasha he was leaving and wished her luck with the escape, while she urgently called for him to wait. The dark-haired man in the black hoodie looked back, asking the blue-haired woman why helping her was supposed to be common sense. A blue-haired woman thrust a bag of cash toward the dark-haired man, insisting she would pay him if he helped her. A hand displayed thick bundles of glowing banknotes, the money sparkling in the air between them. A dark-haired boy and a blue-haired girl shook hands, and he remarked that the contract was done, already thinking about spending the money on manga. A blue-haired woman closed her eyes and adjusted her checkered hat, finally admitting she could no longer keep her secret. Moments later, a blue-haired woman in a school uniform radiated a soft, glowing aura as the air seemed to hum with silent power. A dark-haired young man blinked in surprise after hearing someone mention that her father was well known in Russia. A blue-haired woman spoke softly, hinting that something important was about to be revealed. The blue-haired girl calmly explained that she suspected someone was planning to kidnap her for ransom. A shocked young man stared up, realizing the blue-haired girl floating above him was the famous character from Scramble Love. A burst of excitement declared that Alec, now revealed as one of the main heroines, left everyone scrambling to remember her full name. Bright storefront lights spill onto the sidewalk as a friendly store clerk calls out a polite farewell to the departing customer. A confident blue-haired woman in sporty clothes stands in the store and asks how her new outfit looks. The blue-haired girl told the dark-haired young man that the clothes looked easier to move in and instructed him to protect her until 7. A confident blue-haired woman tells a determined dark-haired young man she can handle things herself and asks if there's anywhere interesting to visit since it's her first time in Japan. The dark-haired young man suggested that hiding in crowded places would be safer, questioning if sightseeing made sense while kidnappers were still after them. The confident silver-haired woman assured the hesitant dark-haired man that a crowd would make it harder for their pursuers to act, though he still sounded unsure. Sasha, a popular heroine from Russia, is introduced with a confident smile and a subtle nod to her status in the original story. A confident orange-haired boy grinned and declared that, since Sasha met him first, he must now be the story's main character. A black-haired boy pulled a blue-haired woman along urgently, wondering if this moment took place before her official debut in the story. Then, the black-haired boy ran with the blue-haired woman, questioning if he should get involved as they fled from the suited men chasing them. A dark-haired young man glared ahead, demanding to know if someone was trying to buy him off, and if they meant to insult him. A cheerful girl waved stacks of cash, telling a nervous boy it was simply too much money for anyone to refuse. A dark-haired young man gritted his teeth, telling himself he just needed to endure for 6 hours while a blue-haired girl watched with a sly grin. A blue-haired woman in a black hat smirked, saying she was good at judging people. The blue-haired woman gripped the dark-haired young man's wrist, thinking to herself that she could sense his strength just by looking at him. The dark-haired young man told the blue-haired woman that someone should be able to hold their attackers off for 6 hours. The blue-haired woman urged the dark-haired young man to keep moving, warning that staying put would get them caught, when a voice suddenly ordered them to stop. Men in suits shouted for backup as the dark-haired young man realized they'd been discovered and braced himself to run. A dark-haired young man and a silver-haired woman sprinted through city streets, trading anxious questions about whether their pursuers were elite ex-agents or just a weird brand. An authoritative voice told them it was time to move, and the dark-haired young man immediately sprinted toward the figure waiting on the city street. Without warning, a blond man drove his fist into the black-haired boy's jaw, stopping him cold. A dark-haired young man snaps up his arm, blocking the blonde-haired man's punch as both freeze in sudden surprise. A fearful and alarmed man jerked back in shock, his eyes wide as something unseen sent a jolt through him. A dark-haired young man hoisted the man in a suit overhead, just as the man in a suit cried out in shock. 3 men in suits slammed their fists into the victim of the attack, sending him crashing to the ground in a burst of purple energy. A dark-haired young man glanced back with tension, just as a blue-haired woman behind him let out a startled exclamation. A dark-haired young man urgently told the blue-haired girl to stay back and hide. A dark-haired young man shoved a red door toward the blue-haired woman, and she froze in shock as it closed between them. A dark-haired young man tugged at his chin, thinking hard as he muttered that he was absolutely certain about what he suspected. A dark-haired young man stood his ground as 5 men in suits charged, thinking these opponents were on a whole different level than street thugs. A dark-haired young man braced himself for a fight, thinking his opponents had underestimated him. A dark-haired young man grimaced in pain as a heavy blow landed, and someone yelled that, in rom-coms, the bigger muscles always win. Explosions tore through the pavement, sending debris flying in all directions. A dark-haired young man squared up, ready to fight, while 2 suited men lay injured, and the others watched in shock. Still, the dark-haired young man clenched his fists and told everyone to fall back. A determined dark-haired young man's eye narrowed with focus as he drove a glowing punch straight into the bald man's jaw. A dark-haired young man jerked back in shock, crying out as a surge of red energy struck his chest. A stern, bearded man adjusted his sleeve as people called out his name and bowed in deference behind him. The surprised dark-haired young man looked up at the towering bald man, asking who he was and admitting the sudden hit actually hurt. A dark-haired young man wondered aloud if his thoughts could really be trusted as he stared upward, sweat trickling down his cheek. A serious-looking man clasps his hands, wondering aloud if the muscle correction technique will affect someone else as well. A serious-looking dark-haired young man stands in tense silence while a blue-haired woman behind glass raises her hands, reacting with surprise. The blue-haired woman held her hands up and admitted she didn't think anyone could overcome such strength. Someone insisted there was no way anyone could ever defeat Captain Boris. A dark-haired young man smirked and decided he would never follow anyone again, no matter how much money was offered. A dark-haired young man stared forward and told himself that, for now, he would stick to his plan. A resolute figure stepped forward at high speed, declaring that they would end this quickly. A gray-haired man recoiled in shock as a blurred hand shot toward his face. A dark-haired young man slammed his fist into the ground, unleashing a surge of purple energy. An unseen but aggressive attacker slammed their hand over the gray-haired man's face in a sudden, violent move. A dark-haired young man stared ahead in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Then, a bald man forcefully grabbed the dark-haired young man's wrist, leaving him stunned and struggling to pull free. Suddenly, the aggressive and dominant fighter drove his fist into the dark-haired young man, sending him crashing backward with overwhelming force. The dark-haired young man crashed to the ground, groaning that the pain shot through him. Still, a gray-haired man lunged and attacked the dark-haired young man, who gasped in shock and wondered aloud if this could really be happening. Moments later, the aggressor attempting a grappling submission move locked in an armbar, while the victim caught in an armbar, resisting, shouted out in disbelief. A serious man with a beard stood frozen as an ominous purple light flared behind him. The shocked, injured man clutched his arm and let out a sharp cry as pain shot through him. A dark-haired young man hurled the bald man over his shoulder while the bald man shouted in shock. A dark-haired young man gritted his teeth as he realized he was trapped in a joint lock, cursing his opponent under his breath. The injured man grimaced and yelled in pain that his hip joint was hurting. A dark-haired young man hurled a blond man backward through the narrow alley, his aggression escalating as the fight intensified. A bearded man is struck with brutal force and sent flying backward by an unseen blow. A blue-haired woman wearing a solar cap threw up her hand in alarm, her eyes wide with shock at what just happened. 3 men stood tense in the city street, the one in front reaching forward with urgency as the others watched his reaction. A young man with dark hair stands over an older man in a suit, watching silently as clouds gather overhead. A bruised young man leaned in and demanded to know if anyone would take responsibility if his injury kept him from going to the gym. A blue-haired woman edged open the glass door, glancing at the young man with dark hair as tension hung thick between them. A young man with dark hair radiated a fierce purple aura, leaving those around him stunned by the sheer force of his power. Shadows stretched across the empty warehouse floor, and the silence pressed in like a warning. A mysterious and serious bearded man lifted his smartphone to his ear, his expression tense in the darkness. A blue-haired man in a fur-collared coat quietly informed the Tsar over the phone that Captain Boris had been defeated. The blue-haired man smirked into the phone, insisting that no martial artist in Japan could possibly have defeated Boris. Moments later, a tall man with messy black hair stepped into the purple light, his footsteps quiet as someone off-screen began to describe him. Still, the serious older man with blue hair asked over the phone if the person they were tracking was really the one called Black Yiksha. A computer screen flickers to life as someone anxiously asks if rumors about the Black Yiksha's return are true. Then, someone insists the rumor is real, saying a fight just broke out in Akihabara, and word is already spreading across Tokyo. A hand clicks the computer mouse, the bluish glow from the screen casting a calm light over the scene. Still, a woman with black ponytail sits quietly, her eyes fixed on the bright screen's blue glow. Still, someone doubts the Black Yiksha's strength, wondering if his reputation is exaggerated and asking why he disappeared if he was truly so powerful. Still, a determined girl's blue eyes glow as she focuses intensely ahead. Years ago, the god of destruction named Ivan sought a worthy opponent and launched the first God of Fist tournament in 1999. A powerful man with blue hair stands surrounded by crackling energy as two fighters clash above him beneath the looming God of Fist title. Suddenly, a dark, hooded figure called Fuma Kotaro appeared, his form pulsing with a strange purple aura. The hooded figure competed once, but people said the Black Yiksha fought to the finals and instantly became a legend. A woman with bangs pressed her hand to her face, lost in thought. A serious dark-haired girl wondered aloud if the rumors about Fuma Kotaro's return were true. A tense young woman pressed her hand onto the table, the low light casting shadows across her arm. A determined young woman with long dark hair threw a punch with all her strength to the right. Light spilled into the room as a mysterious hand slowly turned the door handle. A young woman with long purple hair looked out at the empty street and softly murmured something under her breath. A young woman with long purple hair called out, demanding that her father stop and wait for her. For smiling maids greeted their master at the door, and the brown-haired maid spoke up to warmly welcome him home. A cheerful blonde girl poked a stunned dark-haired boy and said she had always wanted to hear that kind of greeting. A frustrated young man with dark hair muttered that of all places, she had to choose a maid cafe, while a cheerful blue-haired woman teased that it was essential in Japan. The attentive maid eagerly asked the young man with dark hair to sit down, gesturing toward the chair as the blue-haired girl waited nearby. A young man with dark hair nervously read a pink book while a blue-haired girl laughed, saying he was too relaxed about being hunted and they'd be safe. A young man with dark hair frowned at the menu and said he'd order the omurus since he'd already accepted the advance payment. A young man with dark hair checked his phone and told the blue-haired woman he couldn't find any news online about the earlier street fight. A young man with dark hair tried to recall what EMP meant and wondered aloud what EE combatants were supposed to be. A blue-haired young woman told the young man with dark hair that EE stands for Easter Egg Company, a powerful Russian military-industrial corporation. The confident woman with blue hair told the surprised black-haired boy that she was the child of someone important, and he questioned her claim. A cat maid named Hayaniko Nyan bounced forward, introducing herself as the cafe's star, while the blue-haired girl exclaimed her excitement, and the dark-haired man stared in disbelief. A cat-eared girl served omurus, and the girl with the solar cap told the young man with dark hair that it looked delicious. The young man with dark hair lifted his spoon, but the playful cat-eared girl quickly asked him to wait before he could eat. The playful cat-eared girl told them there was a ritual to perform before eating and urged them to repeat after her, making the others hesitate. The playful cat-eared girl formed a heart with her hands and told everyone it was time to begin. The playful cat-eared girl chanted her cute spell, making hearts appear, while the black-haired boy got a nosebleed, and the blue-haired girl in a solar hat copied her. The blue-haired girl demanded the hesitant dark-haired boy start the ritual, while the pink-haired girl insisted he had to do it because it was their cafe's rule. A young man with dark hair grimaced as he let out pained sounds, struggling to endure whatever agony gripped him. A young man with dark hair nervously formed a glowing heart with his hands, while the chibi character with blue hair laughed and asked what he was doing. A cat-eared girl in a maid outfit set a plate in front of a young man with dark hair, teasing him to enjoy his meal while the blue-haired woman laughed. A young man with dark hair admitted he was exhausted, but said at least the food tasted good as he lifted another spoonful. The cheerful girl with cat ears asked if everyone enjoyed their meal. A girl in a maid outfit announced she had special permission to play a card game with a young man with dark hair, while the blue-haired girl sounded excited. A girl in a cat-themed maid outfit playfully declared there would be a penalty for the loser as she presented a cat ear headband to a nervous boy. The excited blue-haired girl declared that the young man with dark hair must wear cat ears and end every sentence with a silly meow. The young man with dark hair nervously asked the blue-haired girl if there might be any other penalty. Someone off-panel challenged the young man with dark hair, asking if he was scared and telling him to just win. A young man with dark hair glared ahead, declaring with resolve that if that's how it was going to be, he would accept the challenge. A young man with dark hair locked eyes with the confident blue-haired girl as they prepared to play their next hand. A pair of playful cat ears perched atop black hair, sparkling against a pink background. A blushing young man with dark hair and cat ears struggled to speak as two unseen voices urged him to say anything for the penalty. Frustrated, the young man with dark hair muttered that they should play one more round, while the blue-haired girl burst out laughing at him. The playful chibi figure teased the young man with dark hair, saying his new look didn't suit him at all. Someone shouted with frustration that they were determined to win the next round. A polite guest stepped through the door and called out a cheerful farewell. A cheerful woman with gray hair laughed and stretched, teasing the frustrated young man with dark hair that he never managed to win a single game. A cheerful young woman with purple hair reassured someone that missing sightseeing didn't matter, since she had a wonderful time because of them. Their footsteps echoed side by side on the tiled floor, neither the girl with white shoes nor the man with dark pants breaking the silence. The reserved young woman with silver hair admitted she had something important to confess, causing the curious young man with dark hair to react in surprise. The young man with dark hair learned the people he fought earlier were bodyguards hired by someone's father, leaving him stunned by the revelation. A worried young woman wearing a solar cap apologized and admitted she snuck out to see Japan, never expecting things to spiral. The man in the dark hoodie told the woman with long silver hair she could go home, saying he would handle the bodyguards and return to the hotel. A confident woman with silver hair stood smiling in the sunset, expressing her gratitude to those around her just as a helicopter passed overhead. A triumphant voice broke through the darkness, loudly announcing they had finally found their target. A confident older man with a white beard and glasses smirked, his sly smile bright under the harsh lights. The dark-haired boy stared up at the helicopter and blurted out a shocked question as a silhouette suddenly jumped from the sky. A hand slammed onto the wooden table, echoing determination through the tense silence. A helicopter hovered in the fiery sky as a blurred figure crashed down near a woman with long silver hair and a dark-haired man. A smug older man with gray hair thanked Sasha for making his search much easier with her recent stunt. A young man with dark hair stared in disbelief, saying someone had just jumped straight out of a helicopter. Someone off-panel demanded to know who thought they could address Sasha so casually. A blue-haired girl in a cap demanded to know how the pursuer managed to find them. A confident older man with an eye patch said he was here for personal reasons involving his daughter. A confident older man with gray hair and sunglasses strode toward two younger people, announcing he had personal business involving his daughter. The young woman apologized nervously to the older man for leaving without permission, and he told her it didn't matter anymore. The dark-haired boy suddenly realized the older man must be Sasha's father. The dark-haired boy wondered aloud why the Russian father and daughter spoke Japanese, admitting that it made things much easier for him to follow. A blue-haired man in a solar hat reacted with surprise as he heard someone mention that the Black Nightcrawler had appeared in Tokyo. The confused dark-haired boy pointed to himself as the gray-haired person nervously wondered if she was the one being accused. A knowledgeable and revealing secret older man declared that the hooded figure was the legendary contract killer who vanished a decade ago. A shocked young man with dark hair pointed and announced that the black nightcrawler was actually named Fumakotaro. Shock hit as the narrator wondered what the young man with dark hair could possibly mean by his outburst. A fierce older man with blue hair shouted that today was the day he would finally settle the score with Black Nightcrawler after 18 years. A blue-haired man pointed at a dark-haired man and demanded to know who he was. He replied that his name was Kim Yusung. An older man with gray hair and sunglasses asked Kim Yusung if he knew Fumakotaro, and Kim Yusung replied that he had never heard the name. Dark-haired man and a silver-haired woman stood silently on the tiled path as the older man faced them, tension thick in the warm evening air. The older man told Sasha he would leave now that her father had arrived, reminding her to get home safely before turning away. A dark-haired boy tried to assure himself there had been a mix-up, insisting he couldn't be Fumakotaro, then hesitated as doubt crept in. The older man in the fur-lined cape demanded to know how the dark-haired boy managed to defeat Boris, his captain of the guards. The dark-haired boy nervously asked if someone could pass along his apology to the big man he fought earlier. The blue-haired man admitted he thought the person was a kidnapper, so he hadn't held back when he struck him. A mysterious presence initiated movement, stepping forward onto the ground in silence. A blue-haired man with glowing fists charged forward, preparing to unleash an attack on a young man with dark hair. The dark-haired boy froze, his face twisted in shock as panic surged through him. Still, the older man clenched his fist as purple energy gathered, readying himself for the next move in the heart of the city. A blue-haired girl in a black cap shouted Kim Yusung's name, her voice cutting through the chaos. Determined hand tore open the dark bag, exposing torn papers and a pink book amid swirling debris and a smoky haze. The dark-haired young man gripped the torn book tightly and demanded to know what was happening. The blue-haired older man smirked and challenged his unseen opponent, telling him to prove his strength as well. The dark-haired boy lunged for his falling backpack, cursing that his new manga was about to be ruined. The young man with dark hair glared through tears, shouting that he would never forgive anyone who dared to mess with his manga. A blue-haired man with sunglasses rushed forward, aiming straight at the young man with dark hair, who braced himself in surprise. A young man with dark hair barely shielded himself as the blue-haired man unleashed a furious barrage of punches, gasping in alarm. The young man with dark hair lunged forward and unleashed a powerful punch, the air crackling with explosive force around his fist. A blue-haired man with sunglasses hurled his fist forward, purple energy swirling as he drove the attack with unwavering focus. A young man with dark hair launched a blazing kick, his foot glowing as he tore through the air with unstoppable speed. Dark-shoed figures stumbled hard, letting out a sharp cry of pain as their foot struck the ground. A confident older man in sunglasses peeled off his leopard print coat, remarking that he found the situation amusing and guessed it must be entertaining for everyone else. A muscular blue-haired man loomed over the young man with dark hair, demanding to know his reason for acting this way. The young man with dark hair recoiled from another blow, protesting that if he truly was a genius, there was no reason to hit him. The blue-haired man punched forward, wondering aloud how a regular student with no training managed to defeat Boris, his own captain of the guards. Then, the blue-haired man drove his fist into the young man with dark hair, declaring that what he saw was absolutely impossible. The older man with glasses called someone a genius, declaring they possessed a rare talent seen only once in a century. A young man with dark hair stared ahead, his breath ragged as he tried to gather strength and whispered that he was ready to keep going. A muscular man with spiked hair clenched his glowing fist as energy surged and gathered around him. The older man with white spiky hair demanded that the unseen listener agree to work for him. A confident man with blue hair and sunglasses punched forward, declaring he would help someone realize their full potential. The young man with dark hair finally understood the true nature of his world, whispering to himself the name Scramble Love. The young man with dark hair looked up with fierce resolve, insisting this was no ordinary romantic comedy. The young man with dark hair and a brown-haired boy launched themselves into the air, each preparing to strike as tension crackled between them. It started like a romantic comedy, but now a blonde girl angrily called the blonde boy a pervert after recognizing him from this morning. The young man with dark hair strained to lift a heavy barbell, thinking he had trained every single day since arriving in this world. A blonde man lunged forward with a clenched fist, attacking the shadowed figure as frustration over constant fights echoed in his mind. The young man with dark hair stood tall, fists clenched, convinced his incredible strength could only mean one thing. A manga cover flashes across the scene, and the narrator announces that the story has transformed from a romantic comedy into a shonen battle series. The black-haired young man said he was absolutely certain, because this manga was serialized in jumping. The narrator explained that competing as a pure romantic comedy in a battle-heavy magazine like Jumping would have been an impossible challenge. 3 frustrated men in headbands gather around a computer as one wonders if the author might shift the manga from romance to action for better rankings. A close-up of the dark-haired boy's intense eye shows him silently considering his next move. A menacing blue-haired man reached for the frightened young boy, declaring he wanted the boy as his subordinate, while danger seemed to close in from all sides. The confident blue-haired man raised his fist and asked if the dark-haired boy would become a scholarship student for their EE company. The blue-haired man promised to cover tuition, college fees, a house, and a car if the dark-haired boy agreed to his offer. The young man with a sinister smile clenched his fist, and the older man recoiled, letting out a shocked gasp. A determined young man with dark hair smirked and declared that he refused the offer. The narrator wondered if, in a typical jumping-style battle series, the old man's strength would actually matter. Someone off-screen stated the blonde boy would inevitably lose to the protagonist, while a blonde boy stood triumphant with his foot on the blue-haired boy. A young man with dark hair slung his arm around a surprised blonde-haired boy and thought that sticking close to the protagonist was the safest move. An older man with silver hair and sunglasses smirked, then said he was ready. A blue-haired bearded man with sunglasses hurled a furious punch, shouting that his opponent might as well die. A young man with dark hair shouted at someone off-panel, demanding to know why they were being so extreme. A blue-haired man slammed his fist into a young man with dark hair, and the younger man cried out in pain from the blow. Still, the young man with dark hair clutched his chest and realized in fear that someone was genuinely trying to kill him. The blue-haired man lunged forward, thinking he had tried to go easy since the opponent was Sasha's father, but now he attacked with force. Then, the young man with dark hair snapped wide-eyed with shock, a sudden realization flashing through him as everything changed in an instant. Then, the young man with dark hair landed a fierce punch to the older gray-haired man's head, seizing the brief opening in their high-speed clash. The older white-haired man clenched his fist at the young man with dark hair, silent tension crackling between them as the sun dipped low behind their standoff. Still, the gray-haired man gazed silently at the glowing sunset, his expression heavy with thought. Still, a battle-worn older man with a blue beard glared forward, his eyes burning with determination. A young man with dark hair reacted in alarm, yelling that something terrible had just happened. A blue-haired older man swung his hand forward in a swift, forceful attack. A hand slammed into the young man with dark hair's face as he cried out in pain. The blue-haired man seized the brown-haired man's face and told him he had some advice to share. Muscular figure clenched his fist, blue energy swirling around it as he prepared to strike. The fierce, glowing-eyed man launched a devastating punch, saying any opponent must be faced with the intent to kill. Still, the dark-haired boy clutched his face, his wide eyes filled with fear. A glowing fist smashed into a young man with dark hair. The world erupted in blinding light and violence. Still, the older white-haired man slammed his glowing purple fist down onto the fallen figure as debris scattered through the fiery air. The young man with dark hair gasped for air on his knees as an older gray-haired man watched him in silence. A young man with dark hair caught his breath, thinking he had barely escaped the other man's grip. A young man with dark hair flinched as the larger man's punch flew past, wondering aloud what kind of move he had just witnessed. The older man with a gray beard smiled and confidently declared the phrase, "double-headed eagle of the emperor." A young man with dark hair recoiled in shock, demanding to know what was happening as glowing chains appeared beneath him. The blue-haired man explained that he was using the Romanov Imperial Secret Martial Arts, known as the Emperor's double-headed eagle. The blue-haired man delivered a swift counterpunch, forcing the young man with dark hair backward. The young man with dark hair clenched his fist, frustrated as he admitted he couldn't track the Imperial Secret Martial Arts with kinetic vision alone. Suddenly, a desperate blue-haired woman shouted for her father to stop amid the chaos. A silver-haired man with a beard shouted at Sasha, insisting she stay out of it because he had to take someone with him. The dark-haired young man raised his fists, bracing himself for the fight ahead. The gray-haired man said they should join him if they wanted to survive, promising to teach every technique he knew. Large, imposing man with glowing eyes told the determined young fighter that only a true fighter could block his attacks so easily. A powerful entity claimed that the weak always submit to strength and promised to grant power. The bruised young man clenched his fist and told his opponent that only the real Chinibu was standing right here. Bruised, dark-haired young man declared with determination that everything was different in this place. He thought about the friends he had made here and insisted there was no reason to give them up for anything else. A wounded young man lunged down in fury, punching at a calm older man as the older man shouted that not a single one remained. The older man met the challenge with a steady gaze, calmly stating that such conviction was admirable but refusing to give up. The resolute and battle-worn young man declared he would not let go of his conviction as the determined older man thrust a glowing energy blade toward him. A shocked young woman with light purple hair shouted urgently that someone needed to crush it. A strong and aggressive combatant slammed his fist into the man in the jacket, sending a burst of light erupting between them. The young man with dark hair cried out in pain as a searing flash struck his face. The silver-haired older man drove his fist into the young man with dark hair, landing a punishing blow as the fight raged on. Still coughing hard into his arm, the young man with dark hair struggled to catch his breath. Suddenly, a blue-haired man charged at the young man with dark hair, making him gasp in shock. The blue-haired man slammed his fist into the young man with dark hair, leaving him reeling in pain and shock. The determined older man with blue hair clenched his glowing fist, letting out a sharp exclamation as a surge of energy coursed through him. The blue-haired, bearded man calmly catches a glowing punch with his hand, stopping the fierce attack in its tracks. Suddenly, a hand seized the young man with dark hair, leaving him stunned and gasping in shock. Then, the young man with dark hair unleashed a fierce punch, blue energy crackling as it slammed into the older man with blue hair. The young man with dark hair shouted that this opponent was on a whole different level compared to Boris. An imposing older man towers over the kneeling young man with dark hair, radiating dominance, as their confrontation grows even more intense. A surge of dark power erupted as an unseen force claimed supremacy. A blue-haired girl wearing a solar cap shouted for everyone to stop. The girl with long purple hair blocked the older man, insisting he'd misunderstood and demanding her father let her finish, but he told Sasha to move aside. The younger speaker threatened the determined older man, warning that if he refused to back down, they would take drastic action. Suddenly, a blue-haired girl gasped as she was struck from behind by a fist. A dark-haired man dropped to his knees beside the fallen girl as the man with light blue hair shouted Sasha's name in alarm. The bruised man asked if the other would truly harm his own daughter just to keep fighting. A dark-haired man clutched his injured arm while a blue-haired woman knelt beside him, both of them breathing heavily in the tense air. The determined older man with white hair declared in a cold voice that he was ready to end things now. The blue-haired warrior clenched his fist, energy crackling, and punched forward with fierce determination. The bruised young man with dark hair braces himself as a massive fist crashes down toward him. The blue-haired man's eyes widened as he jerked his head toward the source of the sudden sound. Several kunai weapons sliced through the air, hurled with explosive speed by an unseen, aggressive attacker. Both men stood frozen on the rooftop. The younger man demanded to know what was happening as kunai knives landed at their feet. Several black and red shurikens hovered in the air as the user of the black yaksha's shuriken summoned them with focused intent. A gray-haired man jerked his head aside, letting out a startled gasp as an arrow shot past his cheek. A dark-haired woman lunged forward, her knife flashing as she targeted a blue-haired man who spun around in shock. A purple-haired girl with a knife charged at a blue-haired man, while a worried man held his arm and a silver-haired girl hit her face. A disheveled young man turned to the dark-haired woman and asked who she was. A determined young woman with dark hair introduced herself as Fuma Yukika, acting leader of the Fuma ninja clan, as someone exclaimed in shock at her rank. A young man with dark hair demanded to know why the other person had shown up. A serious older man with gray hair considered whether Fuma Kotaro was truly the one he had been searching for. The dark-haired girl explained that her father disappeared after leaving the village 10 years ago. The older man with gray hair calmly said he was already familiar with what had been mentioned. The dark-haired woman gripped her daggers, declaring she knew Black Yaksha's daughter stood before her. A confident woman pressed a glowing orb into the cautious man's hand, telling him to take it, and he asked what it was. The urgent figure pressed a glowing yellow pill into the other's hand, quickly explaining it would unlock power that had been hidden until now. The older man with silver hair told his unseen opponent he wouldn't just stand aside and let their plan unfold. A dark-haired girl gripped her kunai as the boy urgently told her to take the object and promised to hold off their attacker. The black-haired man nervously put the small yellow object into his mouth, saying he just hoped it wouldn't kill him. Suddenly, the young man with dark hair stared in shock as bright symbols began to glow across his hand. A fiery explosion ripped through the air as someone screamed in agony, unable to comprehend the searing pain or the strange, burning sensation. The young man with dark hair clutched his chest in agony as a woman behind him cried out, calling his name in disbelief. He screamed in pain as fiery energy surged through his neck and chest. The hooded young man screamed in agony as energy and flames erupted around him.